The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day, and welcome to the Genesis Zone Show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you, as usual, for taking time out of your busy Thursday to join us right here live today. If you're listening to this on the recording, just put hashtag replay in the comments. Let us know that you are listening to it. And again, thank you for being here. Whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to it on the recording, we are so glad to have your support for this podcast. Today, I'm talking about how to get rid of self-sabotage forever. And you may say, Brian, that's a big claim. I can guarantee you can get rid of it forever if you do these few things that I'm going to outline for you. Self-sabotage. Let's talk about that for a minute. If you're a human being, chances are there have been times in your life where you've self-sabotaged. It may have been academically, it may have been with your health, it may have been spiritually, it may have been in your relationships, but there are times in every single person's life where we self-sabotage. Now, some of us, myself included, are masters at self-sabotage, or at least I have been in the past. It's one of those things that I constantly work on, but I work on it on a day-to-day basis to review and evaluate, did I self-sabotage that? What can I do differently next time to make sure that doesn't happen? And did I do the cardinal things that I know to do in order to keep from self-sabotaging? So why self-sabotage? Why do we do this? Well, that's a great question. A lot of times there may be secondary gain type issues, ulterior motives, if you will. And a lot of times these secondary gains or ulterior motives aren't necessarily conscious. A lot of time they're subconscious at the subconscious level, and they may be rooted in our past, from our childhood, from previous experiences. So if you sabotage with your health, and let's just kind of pick on food right now, what you put in your mouth, how you eat, it may be coming, the self-sabotage may be coming from how you had a relationship with food early on in life, or in your teenage years, or in your early 20s, or during a pregnancy, or after a pregnancy, and when children came along. There are multiple points in your life where sabotage can enter. And it's one of those things that once the brain gets used to doing the self-sabotage, whether it be with food or exercise or relationships or your spiritual growth and development, the way you handle your emotions, whatever the case may be, self-sabotage in a way is an escape. It's a way for the subconscious to just check out and escape and not really have to deal with the things it needs to deal with. So if self-sabotage is occurring in your life, you can almost guarantee that there's an underlying emotion or need that is not being met. Okay. So hear that again. There's an underlying emotion or need that is not being met. Okay. And it happens to all of us. Every single one of us deal with emotions that aren't being met in some kind of way in whatever relationship we have. And I'm not talking about people relationships solely. Like I said, relationship with food, relationship with exercise, relationship with our own internal self. How comfortable are we being us? How comfortable are we just sitting with our thoughts and reflecting and thinking through things? A lot of people are not comfortable with that. In fact, most people hate self-reflection. They hate to journal. They don't like those things because it forces them to pull inward and take a look at themselves. And a lot of people don't like to do that. In psychiatry, there's this phenomenon when we're working with children that, well, not necessarily children. It can happen in adult situations where you've got older children or in friend group relationships. But the concept is called the identified patient. So what that means is that this person, the identified patient, quote unquote, becomes somewhat of the scapegoat so that other people don't have to deal with their own stuff. Okay. And in a lot of ways, it's a means of self-sabotaging in a communal, systems oriented, systems related relationship type situation where there are multiple people involved in these relationships. And it's easier to say that, oh, well, that person's the problem, I'm not the problem. Projection, if you will, projecting all of the emotion onto that person, projecting all of your feelings, all of your thoughts, all of your beliefs on that person is the problem, I'm not the problem. Here, we're bringing this person to you to fix in a psychiatric setting or a mental health setting or a medical setting, fix this person. And when you approach things from a global standpoint and you look at things globally from a systems perspective, then you have to consider the entire system is out of balance. I don't like using the word sick. Some people will use that word, but the entire system is out of balance. And we need, or we deserve to repair that entire system, not just the one identified patient, whether that be a friend or a family member or a child of yours or whatever, a coworker at work, that it's easier just to project all of that onto that person, whatever the case may be. But even those things are forms of self-sabotage. Now, when I'm with a person in a clinical setting, a lot of times I'm dealing with self-sabotage from a health perspective. A lot of times people will be really on point with how they're eating, how they're exercising, taking supplements, whatever the case may be. And then when the holidays roll around, a vacation rolls around, a special occasion rolls around, they fall off the wagon, so to speak. And that becomes a problem, yet they don't identify falling off the wagon as the issue. A lot of times what will happen is a client will call the office and say, I need Dr. Brian to call me back ASAP because I'm gaining weight, or because my brain fog has quadrupled in the past 3 weeks, or my energy level is as low as it was when I first started seeing him, and I don't know what's going on. And I call the person back, and the first thing I do is start reviewing the lifestyle modifications that we have introduced into that person's life. And a lot of times they have fallen back on, okay, for the past month, 6 weeks, I've not been exercising. I've been eating junk food. I've been getting a lot more sugar carbs in my diet than I usually do. I'm back to drinking sodas. I'm not drinking water anymore. It's any host of things that can be going on. And unfortunately, when a person is in self-sabotage mode, a lot of times they don't want to admit that the problem can be from within. So when I point these things out very, very gently, I might add, saying, okay, here's the plan. I want you for the next 3 weeks just to make sure you're on point with drinking, 2, 3, 4 liters of water a day, whatever it is we've set for that particular client based on their needs. I want you to go back to eating a really clean, well-rounded diet. I want you to get back to walking 30 minutes a day like you've been doing for months. And then at the end of 3 weeks, I want you to check back in and let me know how you're feeling. Invariably, 100% of the time, when a person gets back on track, they feel as good as they ever did, and they're back to their new baseline, which is where we want them to be, feeling optimized. Okay. So a lot of times it's hard for us to see in the moment when we're self-sabotaging ourselves. And when someone points out that we could be self-sabotaging ourselves, a lot of times it creates frustration, anger, maybe even resentment toward that person, or toward just the concept that the self-sabotage could be coming from within. But then after we get back on track and we have a little bit of perspective, we're able to see, yeah, I probably self-sabotaged that. So what I'm about to tell you is, how can we avoid that process to begin with? How can we make sure that we don't self-sabotage, or at least make it less likely to self-sabotage in the long run, because it's critically important to what's the term we're using today? Adulting. It's very important to becoming an adult, maturing as an adult, and continuing to grow and navigate through life and ascend to higher levels, which hopefully everybody's doing as we move through this life. Hopefully you're not plateaued. Hopefully you're not declining. Hopefully you're ascending and moving to a higher level of wisdom, higher level of knowledge, higher level of enlightenment, if that's the word that you want to use. And I think it's an appropriate word to use, but ascending. And in order to ascend, we have to start dealing with our own self-sabotage. So let me tell you a little story. When I was a kid, I was an incredibly curious kid, like incredibly curious. I was one of the kids that was a rock hound. I collected rocks everywhere I went. No matter where I was, I would always find at least one, usually 10 or 15 or 20 rocks that had to be added to the collection. I remember when I left home, when I was a late teenager, early 20s, I had to deal with all of these rocks, and I actually kept them for a little while. I had to go through and kind of pull out the things that were like huge quartz crystals. I have a piece of petrified wood that's about 1.5 times the size of a softball that I found one time. And so these things I really hold special, and I keep those things. The rest of them were just plain old ordinary rocks. And at the time, through a 5-year-old lens or a 7-year-old lens or an 11-year-old lens, it made sense to me to keep that rock. It didn't make sense to me when I was older, so I let those things go. But needless to say, I was a curious kid. I remember multiple occasions when I would be at family gatherings and I'd be around all 9 of my cousins, and I was the one in the group that always asked why. And my cousins hated that. They wanted to strangle me every time I asked the question why. Why do you ask the question why all the time, Brian? Why do you need to know this? Nobody needs to know this. We don't need to know that. We just need to do. And I would always ask, but why? And I would come back to that question. So I was always this curious kid. In fact, when people ask me, how did you get electrocuted at age 5? And I'll say, it's because I was a curious kid. The TV had become unplugged, and I thought, well, I've seen my parents plug that thing in 1,000,000 times, because that was back in the day. And apologies for the younger crowd here that don't know that TVs didn't actually attach to the wall. They either used to be huge console TVs that weighed 1,000 pounds, or if you were like my family, we couldn't afford one of those. And they were these square boxes that sat on rolling carts. You could actually roll that TV into your dining room and watch TV while you were eating, which was a very 70s thing to do, by the way. If you didn't have TV trays that you set up in your living room and ate off of a TV tray. Again, I'm dating myself, and the younger generation is not going to understand that. But needless to say, we had a rolling cart TV. It had been rolled into the kitchen one night. It was just me and my mom at home. My dad was traveling on business. And she was in the kitchen doing her thing, cleaning up after dinner. And I decided I'm going to roll the TV back into the living room, and I'm going to plug it in because I've seen it done 1,000,000 times. So I plugged the TV in, and bam, I touched one of the prongs. I was a curious kid. I just wanted to see if I could do it. Obviously, I did it wrong. I had 2nd and 3rd degree burns in the palm of my hand, cardiac condition that resulted from that. You've heard that story before. So anyway, being a curious kid, asking the question why has served me well through the years, and it's going to serve you well in understanding how to end self-sabotage forever. Because when clients call and they say, oh, I gained all this weight through the holidays and I didn't do anything wrong, you've got to fix this. And I get on the phone with them and we're reviewing lifestyle. The last thing I do with them is said, okay, let's go back to your why. Why do you want to be healthy? Why do you want to have optimized health? Why do you want to lose 30 pounds? Why do you want those things? And again, at my age, clinically, I'm still asking the question why, but I'm doing it from a perspective to get the client that I'm working with on board with understanding their why. So this is the question I have for you. whatever goal you have set for yourself, whether it's a business goal, a relationship goal, a financial goal, a spiritual goal, whatever, I don't care. You need to ask yourself why. And for every goal that you set, you should have a clear and really big why. Now, I'm going to give you an example, and this example comes out of my book. I talk about this in my book. I have changed the name of this person, and the name I'm going to use here will be different than the name you're going to read in the book, because I changed the name on purpose so it's not well known who this person is. But I was working with a client one time that came to me because she was having a lot of issues with low energy and brain fog and low motivation. Mood was down, anxiety was up, and she really wanted to lose about 95 pounds and needed to lose 95 pounds. Now, this person was a mother of twin boys, and she was a single mom. And during her marriage, and what caused the divorce and the breakup of her and her ex-husband, was that he had become very abusive to the children. In fact, to the point where they had actually gone to court to try to fight it, but there wasn't enough proof to convict the husband, or to get it, not really convict, that's a bad word, to get it where the husband couldn't have visitation rights. So the judge actually continued the 50-50 custody agreement with the parenting plan and kept it as it was. So I start working with her, and we really honed in on most everything that she wants in her life boils down to being healthy enough to do it. And in order to be healthy enough to do it, need to lose this weight, because this weight is kicking our tail, pardon the expression, but it's kicking her tail, and we need to take care of it sooner rather than later. We've got this beautiful window of opportunity where the weight gain has not caused a lot of health ramifications yet, but there's indications on the type of functional labs that we draw that if we don't do something about this in the next 10 years, we're going to have major problems. So all that being said, I start working with her, and we start honing in on her why. I think I saw her about 3 times to really shape and develop that why. And it was in the 4th session that when she came in, because she was having an incredibly difficult time coming up with a why that was big enough. And I'm giving you this example so that you understand how critically important it is to have a why that is huge. And I mean, it needs to be right in front of you, huge, like cannot move around it, Rock of Gibraltar, huge. And she was surface level on everything. Well, I need to do it because I need my health to be better. I need to do it because I don't want to end up like my parents. I need to do it because this, and this. And the blaring thing that was staring me in the face that I did not mention in the first 3 visits, when the 4th visit came around, I asked her permission. I said, is it okay if I share with you where I think your why is? And it's huge. And she said, absolutely. I would love for you to share that with me. So I began to outline a scenario, a storyline for her. And I encourage you to do the same thing for you. Create a future story for yourself, that if you don't accomplish the goal that you have set out to accomplish right now, and I mean with an urgency, that this thing, this bad thing in the future is probably going to transpire. It's probably going to happen, and it's going to be life altering, maybe even life ending. And I know that's extreme, but hear me out. So when she gave me permission to share my thoughts on what I felt was just blatantly staring us in the face as her why, I started sharing it with her. Now, mind you, I'm seeing her on a monthly basis. And in the 4 months, actually, because when we got to the 4th visit, it was the 4th month, she had not lost any weight. She was having a hard time getting motivated. All of the whys, those surface level whys that she had come up with, she hadn't lost any weight. In fact, she had actually gained about 6 or 7 pounds on top of the 95 that she already needed to lose. So right now we were about 102 pounds that she needed to lose. So I started laying out the story for her, and here's what the story was. I said, imagine for a moment that because of your excess weight, you have a heart attack or a stroke. And if you die, it's bad enough. But if you become debilitated to the point that you cannot raise your twin boys, then you get to witness what the court system is going to do with your children. And because you're unable to care for your children because of your physical debilities, the court is going to give your husband, who shares 50-50 custody with you right now, is going to give your husband, the abuser of your children, 100% custody until the time which you're able to physically care for your children, which, because of the weight issues and the stroke or heart attack that you've had, may never actually happen. And when I told her that, her eyes got so big, I thought they were going to pop out of her head. And she broke down and started crying. And that was not the response I was looking for. That was not the response I was trying to create. But I knew at that point, her why was so massively big, Rock of Gibraltar big, that she was going to find the motivation within her through that why to be able to move forward. And when she calmed down, I asked her, I said, how does that sit with you, that why? And she said, I don't like that scenario, but it is the why for why I need to do what I need to do in order to get healthy now. And I said, do you think it's big enough? And she said, oh yes, it's very big. She said, it's bigger than anything I ever came up with in the past 4 months. And I said, yeah. I said, you were dancing all around it and you were staying surface level, which we all tend to do, because let's face it, when we create a why that's so big, it's painful. It's painful to think about what can happen if we don't do X, Y, and Z. And the human brain naturally tries to avoid pain. It's one of the largest things that humans try to do, is run toward pleasure and run away from pain. And you've heard that over and over again. It's no big surprise there. But in mental health, when we self-sabotage, we are running away from pain. And it's very difficult for us to find a why that's big enough, because we have to tap into that pain. So I encourage you to do this, whatever it takes for you to tap into that pain and find that why, that if I don't do X, Y, and Z, this is going to happen. You need to find that place within you, and you can keep it totally private. You don't need to share this with anybody. It's one of those internal things. And the beauty of the story that I just told you about the lady with the twins, single mom, is that within the next 6 months, she lost 70 pounds. That's huge. Remember, we started at 195. She gained some weight. So we were at 102 pounds that she needed to lose. And within 6 months, she lost 70 pounds because her why was big enough. And she would come in each time with the biggest smile on her face, because she said, I know my why. Every single visit she came in, she said, I know my why. And we would get on the scales and weigh, and she would have lost more weight. And every single time she did that. So does your why need to be big enough? Yeah. Does it need to hurt a little when you develop it? You better believe it better hurt a lot. And from the perspective of, if you don't accomplish what this goal is that you've set out to accomplish, this over here in the future is going to happen. Now, what happens when you're going through this process alone is critical. And I want you to hear this next part, because if you don't do this next part, you're not going to find that why that's big enough. So when you start tapping into that why, you need to ask yourself, is it big enough? Does it hurt enough? Is it big enough to motivate me? And be honest with yourself. Be really, really gut level honest with yourself. And I'll tell you how you know when you're getting close, because when you get close to that why that's big enough and hurts a lot, you will start having all of these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, these negative thoughts coming into your mind of like, oh my God, I can't, no, I can't do that. And it may come to the point where you start obsessing about it, to the point where you can't even really continue to finish the process to get close enough, because you start having all these intrusive thoughts. So there's a mindfulness exercise that I've shared with you before, but in a different context. I want to share that mindfulness exercise with you here so that you understand how to deal with these intrusive thoughts. And the mindfulness exercise is several steps. It's very, very, very easy. So the first thing I want you to do is close your eyes, and I want you to visualize that belief and that intrusive thought that you're thinking about. And I want you to give it a name, because our thoughts, our beliefs, even the intrusive ones, need to be named. They need to be acknowledged. If we don't acknowledge an aberrant thought or belief, then we end up attracting the very thing that we're trying to repel from us. The more you push that away from you, the more it's in your face. So when you ignore an intrusive thought, guess what? It doubles and magnifies, it triples, it quadruples, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until all you can do is see it and you can't see anything else. And that's what we don't want. But the weird thing is that you have to acknowledge it, give it a name. If this is the thought of, oh, I can't go down that road because it hurts too much, then call it the painful memory thought. I don't know. You got a name. I name mine by the person it's associated with, because if it's associated with a person, I'll say that's the bad Brittany thought, you know, and I will throw that in there. That's the bad Brittany thought, or that's the bad mom thought, or that's the bad dad thought. That's the bad sister thought. And I'll name it. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then once you name it, I want you to allow it to play in front of your mind. I always say, I kind of like doing this because I'm a very visual person. I allow it to, like a movie projector, I allow it to come in the left side of my head and play like a movie, no more than 3 to 5 seconds. And that is critical. Allow it to tell its story for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then come out the other side. And I always use the analogy of bubbles. Allow it to come out, and no longer is it a movie reel, but now this movie reel that came in on the left side is coming out the right side of your brain in the form of bubbles. And you just mindfully watch those bubbles float off into the distance. Some of them will burst. That's fine. Some of them will float off in the distance. Notice the colors, what shape they are. Do they have a little rainbow iridescence to them? What color is that rainbow iridescence? Is it pink? Is it purple? Is it blue? Is it yellow, green? What do you see there? And as you're watching those float off into the distance, and you feel that you've reached that place of peace and non-attachment as they're floating off, pull into your breath at that point and focus on your breathing. I always encourage people to do what I call whiskey breathing. It really works well on calming the vagus nerve, which runs from the top of your head to your toes. And it's the master control nerve for your fight or flight response. So we can turn that response off by doing that exercise and then pulling into the breath, and inhale for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 8, inhale for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 8, and do that about 3 to 5 times until you feel that place of peace and non-attachment that you had when you were watching the bubbles go off is really at a place where you feel that calmness in your spirit. And once that's done, you can open your eyes and move on, unless another intrusive thought comes in as you're working through this process of getting closer to your why, and you need to pull back in and do that exercise for that particular intrusive thought. Now, this exercise works for anybody, not just related to getting rid of self-sabotage forever. Okay. It can work in any thing that comes up in your life that has an intrusive thought, a negative thought, a disbelieving thought, whatever the case may be. So you've got an opportunity and a tool here to really hone in and start living a life that is an ascension type of life versus a stagnant type of life. And I don't believe in teaching people to depend on me or any other expert or guru. I believe in equipping them with the tools that they need in order to move on in life so that they don't have to depend on this. They get to build a tribe of people who are like-minded, who are also on this ascension journey, who can be their support team without having to pay a dime for it. Have coffee with a friend that's on the same journey as you, a little bit further down the road, and can give you that wisdom to move forward, can be on the same page with you and doing these exercises. That's critical. And that's the last thing I'm going to leave you with, is start building your tribe of people who are supportive for you. And yeah, this may mean that you need to end some of your friendships and relationships because they're no longer supportive. They are actually pulling you down, and you need to be really cognizant of that. And start evaluating in your life, is this relationship with this friend pulling me down, or is this helping, or are we helping each other ascend this mountaintop journey that we're on? So I hope this has been helpful for you. In clinic, I see that people self-sabotage all the time, and it's 90% of the reason why they don't successfully complete their goals, no matter what their goals are. And I will say this, there are some reasons why your body will sabotage for you and you didn't really have any control over it. I have found that epigenetics, understanding the lay of the land and how your body responds to its internal environment and its external environment, is a good way to avoid your body self-sabotaging you when you don't want to, when you don't want it to happen. So if you're curious about what that looks like, how you can understand epigenetics a little bit more, how you can take the next step, I have a boot camp. I pulled it up on the screen if you're watching this on replay or you're watching this live. But if you're listening by podcast only, the URL is drbriangibrown.com/gene-hack/bootcamp. That's drbriangibrown.com/gene-hack/bootcamp. And you can go there and register for free for a bootcamp that I've created on how to understand epigenetics, number one, and number two, where you probably need to start in evaluating your epigenetics so that you can take the next step forward and stop the self-sabotage in your body. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook at Dr. Brian G. Brown. Again, that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook at Dr. Brian G. Brown. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. That's all I've got for today. Until next time, as usual, most grateful that you spent this time with us here today. Until next time, stay in the zone. This is Dr. Brian Brown.